So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to jump right into Max. And most of you guys should have got the file I left in your project folder. So this already has the units already set up. You should already have the unit setup already in there. If you don't, or you want to know what the unit setup is, we can just quickly go in here under Customize Unit Setup. And essentially, we're using centimeters. So centimeters is going to give us an actual real world unit to work with. So if we're measuring door widths and door heights and stuff like that, we already know what we're working with. So metric centimeters under System Unit Setup, it's simply 1 unit equals 1 centimeter. So already tested it in Unreal. It works really well. There's no problem. So that's what we're going to stick with. So those Unreal files I sent you, everything's already set up. One thing that I did notice after the fact and that you might want to adjust is the character height. So this character in Unreal, I think they made it like a 192 centimeters or something like that, which is like what, like somebody that's 6 feet tall or 6'1" or something like that. I think that realistically it should be a little bit shorter than that. I don't know why they like are so determined to make their characters monstrous, like giants, but this also kind of affects like the scale of the things you're building. So I think a better height is, sorry, just let me change this. A better character height, I think, is like just 180 centimeters. That's about 5'11", which is more average. And I think that will give you a better feel to your environment. It's just a subtle change, but I think it really makes a big difference in the end.
I noticed also that when you're in first person, because I was walking around in first person on my level, that everything seemed, your perspective did look like the camera was like a little lower too, which was also kind of like throwing me off because everything just didn't look the height that I've measured it out in 3ds Max.
Yeah, so this is part of the problem, I think, is like that they're making their characters like these juiced up monsters, and like so this might help with that again. And like I mentioned earlier, when you're working with real world scale in video games, it can feel claustrophobic. So you have to adjust and exaggerate a tiny bit until it feels right. So that's why this very early blockout stage is so important. Okay, so once we establish a proper character height, now we're pretty much ready to start modeling our modular sections. And sorry, this friggin' thing is in the way here. I'm trying to minimize the bar at the top for Zoom, and I don't know, it's like I can't access my Max controls. Yeah, okay, anyways, we'll have to work like this. Yeah, so once we're ready to start building, there's a few rules that that are good to adhere to. So I'm just gonna start with like a wall section. And this is gonna be just like a flat wall, and we're gonna build it from there. So I'm gonna start with a box, and I'm simply just gonna drag one out, make it fairly thin. And so one thing that you have to, I'm going to adjust the height of this stuff a little bit later. The one thing that is really important to work with is when you're initially creating your walls, the best workflow is to stay within a power of like, what's it called? What's the word? Stay in multiples of 10. So for example, if I just block out this wall, initially just block it out. I can look at my numbers after and I can round them out. So height, I can make like 220 instead, so multiples of 10. Width is 264, so maybe 260. And length is 15, so maybe I'll go with 10 instead. So what this does is it'll help you when you're building your modular pieces to stay on the grid. So we're working with a grid of about 10 grid space, like a 10 grid unit. Each of these units is about 10 centimeters or whatever it is, or I don't know what it is. It's 10 units in max. So it's also by default in Unreal, the snapping is set to 10. And it is set to 10. So if it's set to 10 in max, it's going to be set to 10 in Unreal. We know it's going to work. It's going to snap properly. So we can also check if we go into our snaps toggle at the top here. If we right click, you can go into your grid and snap options. And under home grid, we can see that our grid spacing is set to 10 centimeters. And in Unreal, by default, our grid is 10 centimeters as well. So that's how we know it's going to correspond. If you want to be more precise, you can set your grid spacing to 5 centimeters. And you can then, as long as you change your grid spacing in Unreal to 5, then you should be totally fine. If you need to be a little bit more precise, I find that like keeping it at 10 works pretty well. Another thing that I like to do in the grid and snap settings is when I'm doing modular pieces is the perspective view grid extent. I'll change that to about 100 just so that we can see more of the grid. So as we're working and trying to snap these pieces around, we can see the grid lines on the floor. So there's a few more options in here, but we're going to close this for now. And the very first thing I like to do also is right away to move the pivot to one of the corners. So I'm going to go into Effect Pivot Only. And I'm going to just move that pivot right to one of the corners. So I like to use the back corner. Oops, sorry guys. So I like to snap it to the back corner, just because like sometimes I like to do extrusions out of the front, and I just want to keep it snapped somewhere like out of the way. And then you can just like take the whole thing and actually snap it. Oh, sorry, I turned something on here. Let me just turn this off. Okay, so just move it and snap it to the grid. So you can see that now it's aligned to the grid. Because I made it about 10 units wide, you can see that it's taking up one of those grid units. So it's taking up a grid unit there, and it aligns perfectly to the back here. So as long as you're working in multiples of 10, then you shouldn't have any problems, and always snapping your modular pieces to the grid. One thing about ceiling height. So I'm looking at the height of this this wall piece here. On average, ceiling heights are about 8 feet, so that's 240 centimeters. Just in case any of you guys wanted to know that, 140 centimeters on average for ceiling. I know some of you guys have like taller ceilings, so that's totally fine. I mean, this is just kind of a guideline if you're making a room. I know Sarim, you're doing the bedroom, so that's something that you might want to adhere to. 240 centimeters, and some other of you guys are doing stuff like that. Ian as well, so that might be something that you take into consideration. Okay, so after that's done, then we can start any modeling that we're going to do. So convert to editable poly. And for this one, actually, before I start modeling, I'm just going to throw a texture on here. So I'm already thinking about what tileable texture I'm going to use. And for now, I'm just going to make this like a brick wall. Okay. And you guys can just maybe search one online. I already like have one set up here. So you're already like throwing a tileable texture on it. Like if you have like a stucco painted wall, throw a painted wall on there. You have like wooden boards, like Nick does, throw wooden boards on there. And then already I'm gonna start like unwrapping. And just making sure that I am like going right to the extents of the boundary, just so I know that when I apply a tileable texture, it's gonna tile perfectly. So if this wall was more, this is a pretty square wall, but if it was more narrow, like something like this, I would just make sure that I scale it up enough that the edges come into contact here, and because the texture tiles, I know that it's going to tile perfectly anyways. So just make sure that you're always at the edge of the UV boundary. So this is going to look a little stretched for now. It's okay. And you can see that right away if we have our grid and snap settings on. If I duplicate this, it just snapped right into position. The texture will tile perfectly. So to keep that in mind, as long as you're aligned to the sides